The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
CJ, another move out of New York. This time it's Kaapo Kakko. He's getting traded to the Seattle Kraken in exchange for Will Borgen and 2 draft picks. What'd you think of the move? How did we get here?
Well, it's been a long road for Kaapo Kakko and the Rangers. Even though he's a young guy, just a 23-year-old forward, I mean, from being a second overall pick to being scratched to having a bounce back season 2 years ago to being scratched again last season, even in the playoffs, to, having a pretty good start to this year. You're going to see a trend here, get scratched on the weekend, and then is pretty, open in the media about his displeasure at that. I mean, I'll save you the exact quotes and just, sum it up and say he felt he was scapegoated. He said it was easy to take a young guy out of the lineup. He didn't think he'd been anywhere near the worst, and that essentially all he'd been told from the coaching staff was they had to change something because of how much the Rangers have been losing. So, it has been very up and down ride. His name had been in trade rumors certainly last season, if not before that. But last year, the Rangers, considered what a move could look like if it made sense then. Even when they signed him just to a 1-year extension last year, because he's coming up now where he's going to need a new contract. Kakko is a year away from being UFA, so the Rangers and he would have to be in a point where they felt like, he wanted to stay there for a number of seasons. Clearly that hasn't happened. And so he gets a fresh start. And, I think it's the kind of deal if you're Seattle, who we really haven't talked about a lot on the show this year, but I'd say they've been a little disappointing this season. Just sort of in the mushy middle, but, it doesn't feel like they quite have the juice to get into a playoff run. I mean, there's still half a season, so don't want to rule that out, but, I can see there's a lot of potential upside in a trade like this for this sort of player. As for the Rangers, I mean, we've just banged this drum so much. I mean, I don't know what's all going to happen next, but now you start looking at it. They've traded their captain. They've traded, pretty. It was a high draft pick. So I mean, I guess at a certain point he stops becoming the former second overall pick, because that's maybe not relevant at this point. He is what he is in terms of what he's producing on the ice and in terms of results and in terms of what his value is. But it's not easy to be shipping a guy like this away. But look, they're in a period of transformation there. So I think the Rangers, they certainly like Will Borgen, right shot D, who I think, would have had a lot of suitors closer to the trade deadline. I know of a couple teams that had pretty good interest in him in the sense that they were planning ahead to the deadline and saying like that was one of our targets. So they kind of get a jump on the market that way. They get a couple sort of mid-round picks, which, could be used for all kinds of things down the road. You wonder, does Borgen end up, basically just sort of sliding into a Jacob Trouba-like role for them on their blue line and stay the rest of the season? Or I guess maybe if the fit isn't right, could be the Rangers dealing him again before the deadline. I mean, I don't think anything can be ruled out right now in New York.
The sense I'm getting from Rangers fans on this trade is just they're not happy, obviously, with the move, but also just for a player of Kaapo Kakko's caliber, a second overall pick, like you mentioned, just not working out. Like one person I was talking to yesterday just called it an unmitigated disaster. Like there's a lot of disappointment around basically the entire. Well, I shouldn't say the entire Kaapo Kakko era. He did have the kid line era with Philippe Hedl and Alexis Lafrenière, but just pretty disappointing in when you look at his Rangers era in totality. But I don't think it's necessarily, or at least some people, depending on who you talk to, or you could tell me different, maybe it's not necessarily just him. Maybe it's just the fit wasn't right. How do you assess it?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard to sum 6 years up into one answer, but I think that, part of, first of all, he comes in around the COVID time, which, it's not just him, but we can look at a wide swath of NHLers that had kind of development years or their first pro years just be part of that whole weird thing. And likely have affected the way their careers have started. I think it's only natural to look at it that way. On top of that, he joined a team that was sort of ready to win, often second overall picks, and it can go the other way, right? We talk about Connor Bedard, like, does he have enough players to play with? But, Connor Bedard went to Chicago and has no a shortage of opportunity and minutes to play. Now they're very difficult minutes and not always the most ideal way for his development. But I think at times Kakko had just had a difficulty carving out his spot in the lineup. Because they had more, they had signed a Panarin and they were in kind of a weird spot where it was a quick retool and then they sort of took flight again. And then, some of it I'm sure is on him too. I mean, we can't, it's not like fault lies in one place here, but if you're underwhelmed by the return, I can get it, but you have to recognize this is sort of the danger. I mean, he's a year and a half away from being a UFA. He's on an expiring contract this year. Even so, it's that what that tells you is Seattle is acquiring him for the rest of this season and they have his rights to next year. And so it's, you don't know if you're the other team, you don't know if he has more in him. Like obviously that's Seattle's hope. They're looking at his shooting percentage this year, which is down. They're thinking you could definitely see where there's going to be more production there. If that normalizes, you wonder, hey, maybe he's going to have more opportunity here. Maybe just the fresh start and everything. He can leave some ghosts in the past. But if not, I mean, they're only buying a year and a half of him. They're not buying what New York got originally. So that's where these things get hard. And that's why I think sometimes if you're going to make a difficult decision, you're better to make it a little sooner. Really easy sitting here on a podcast with the benefit of hindsight, but probably a better trade could have been made for Kakko last season. Just because at that point you would have been buying 2+ years of control. So, they kind of got to a point where him as an asset was getting diminished, when he gets scratched and, I don't think his comments directly fueled the trade, but like once the player is openly showing that level of frustration, it's only going to get worse if you hold on to him. So I'm not saying they traded him because they were mad about what he said. It's just more the situation is spilling so much into the public eye and getting so hard for anyone to ignore that it was going to get worse if something didn't happen. So, this could be one of these ones where I could see it working out on both ends, quite honestly. I mean, as I mentioned previously, when they traded Trouba, obviously that was representative of something. It did clear cap space, but they didn't get a player back, which, we had seen they have not won a bunch of games since that trade happened. At least with Will Borgen, I think that there's a reasonable expectation he can fill the type of minutes Trouba did. It allows, Mancini, another young D, maybe more time to develop. So they're not stressing the organization that way. Like this could in a short term be good very much for the Rangers. I think it's going to be good for Kaapo Kakko to get a fresh start, to not feel like he's the one being, scapegoated, picked on, whatever you want to call it, like always singled out whenever something went wrong for the team. And, for the Kraken, I think it's basically all upside. Borgen was a pending UFA for them. And, those draft picks don't have a ton of value.
I'm glad you mentioned the comments. I know we kind of paraphrased them when we brought up Kaapo Kakko in the beginning of the show. As I've seen people put out the report say like, all right, like this trade was in the works. It doesn't have anything to do with the comments. But like, can you think of a time or how many times, or was the last time an NHL player has basically just kind of said something to the effect of what Kaapo Kakko said and didn't get traded almost immediately after? I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but I just feel like whenever I do see that, I just feel like a trade is just imminent for a guy.
Yeah. I mean, look, I put out a trade board this week before those comments were made, and I think he was 5th or 6th on it. So, I mean, it's not a surprise he got traded, and definitely extensive trade conversations happened long before he said that. We get into semantics so much. It's been a week of semantics, it feels like, in the pod worlds. Because I think what some people are probably trying to say is it's not like the minute he said those comments, they're like, okay, he has to go. Like, I don't believe that's the case. Right. But I do think if you're in management, you're already down the road and looking at where, like, you've already kind of made up your mind you're trading this guy. It's just, sometimes timing is just like, maybe wait till after the break. Maybe there's a better offer. Like you might be weighing those games. And then he says that. I just feel like he puts them in the position where it's not like he's going to play better. I don't know. I think it was for him to say that. My understanding, I don't know Kaapo Kakko personally, but like that was out of character for him to be that direct. And, I think it's just all it is. It's a sign of his frustration. And, I mentioned this on our show earlier in the week. It's been my understanding he also wants a fresh start too. And so it's not just that the Rangers have been shopping him around and considering what they might get. But like he was at the end of his sort of rope with everything. And I think it was like, the funny part is I don't even sense it's a bad relationship. I think it's like one of those ones where it's like both sides knew sort of where it had to go and it got there. And so those comments probably expedited it. I realize people are maybe reporting like, no, nothing to do with it. Well, it's like, okay, there's a little, let's work through the layers here. They were already going to trade him, but they did trade him the day after he said it. I think it just made it at that point, like once that happens, it's like, okay, we just got to, what's our best deal? Let's, move on and shake hands, and that's it. And so, the comments had maybe 3% to do with the exact timing of the deal, but they were still a small element, right? I mean, I as I say, I don't think there's bad blood though. That's the other part of it. It's more, those comments said publicly reflected what everyone already knew privately. I mean, there was a lot of frustration, from the player and, maybe from the organization, who's probably been frustrated at times thinking, wanting more from him that they didn't see. And so, this happens. This is pro sports.
So what's next from the New York Rangers, CJ? Probably the best reality show going in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, I messaged our colleague Peter Baugh at The Athletic, and I was like, dude, you're covering a soap opera right now. Just because it's almost something new every day. Like even as I said, like it's no surprise in the big scheme of things that Kaapo Kakko was traded. Like he's been someone who's been on trade boards. Like we've talked about this in the past, but then he comes out and makes those comments, and like each day it just feels like the hits keep coming. I mean, ideally for the Rangers, there's a couple wins and then a nice break for the holidays and a fresh start on the other side of things. I don't know if that'll be the case. I mean, I still maintain the team should be performing at a better level than it is. But the longer that doesn't happen, I mean, you can't see management stopping here if they don't start seeing positive signs, right? So I don't have an answer. We still got Chris Kreider at the top of the trade board. Maybe they push another big domino down at some point. I mean, I'm not suggesting that's going to happen by any means in the next few days. It's just I don't know what they do. I mean, I think that my answer to that is probably what they're feeling a little bit inside too. I mean, they're looking at everything. I think, they're hoping to a degree what they have should be good enough to win games. That's sort of what I come back to. It's like they don't have to reinvent the team, although now it starts to feel like you're starting to do that a little bit more and more. But they still have cap space. They've now got a couple extra picks to trade with. I think their blue line's in a better spot with Borgen there than, the last week since Trouba was dealt without him. And then, so I would think they'll be looking for upgrades at forward next and, just trying to get through this and turn the ship around.
Okay. Of course, whenever the New York Rangers do something from here on out, I will definitely be on top of that on the CJ show. Not the only team, obviously, to make a trade yesterday. Let's go to Nashville. Sorry. Yeah, we'll go to Nashville, Montreal. The Alexandre Carrier trade with Justin Barron, two defensemen getting swapped 1-for-1. What do you think of that deal? One of 3 trades on the day Wednesday. Well,
I like it. Montreal's end of it is interesting. They've been looking for a veteran defenseman to sort of, round out that. They have the two things are true here that sort of explain this trade. The Canadiens have a lot of young defensemen and young defensive prospects. And so there was only ever going to be so much room for them all to play, even when you factor in development time. So I think that's partly what makes a Justin Barron, expendable in this case. Simply because they have other guys ahead of him on the right side, like Logan Mailloux, Reinbacher coming. So they were in a position where they could deal a defensive prospect, and they've really wanted to bring in someone to, I think, help guide the current young defensemen on their roster, the Lane Hudsons and the like, and try to stabilize things there. And Alexandre Carrier does that. He's not a big guy. That would be the most obvious thing people might talk about him, especially for a defenseman. But he's very competitive, been in the league a while, and, it's his dream. It turns out, of course, to being French Canadian to play for the Canadiens. And so there's maybe that nice homecoming element, but the fact that he was available, this is actually a hockey trade. I mean, this has been such a fascinating start to this season. I mean, so many years in hockey, almost every trade, if you wanted like a breakdown, it's like, wow, this team is on their way not to making the playoffs. This team's trying to go on a run. So they got this guy for a draft pick. I mean, like, this is actually a deal where last year Nashville looked at moving Carrier ahead of the deadline because he was a UFA. They kept him. They went on a run. Of course, they made the playoffs. They ended up signing him to a 3-year extension rather than letting him become a free agent. But then they're trading him now when he's still got term on his deal. And so, for Montreal, I think it gives them, a chance to just get more experience with the Goolies and the Jackeyes, Hudson, Struble. They really like his style of play. And then, I think on the Nashville side of things, this is the start of, obviously they've made a few moves already. They're trying to get younger players into their organization. And so they like what's sort of coming in their system, and they're taking a swing on a younger player and opening up some cap space for themselves. Who knows what they may or may not do with that. I mean, I think as much as the Rangers are an interesting story, Nashville's kind of like what happens here, because by no means did they expect to be at the bottom of the standings after the summer they had. They just beat the Rangers this week. I mean, what a strange the way those two teams keep coming together. But that's how I see that deal, and one that kind of came together quickly here just before the trade freeze kicked in.
Not to hop back on the Rangers, but they've lost to the worst team in the league twice in the last few days, and including the Nashville Predators at one point. That's a dizzying stat to see.
They're not scoring, which is why I do think when you say what happens next for the Rangers, looking for ways to make forward upgrades makes sense. They still have one of the best goalies in the world. I mean, Panarin's been out injured, so look, there's some factors, but it's a lot of it doesn't add up. That's why if all of a sudden they start winning a little bit, it won't surprise me. It's kind of what I'm trying to get at, but it's hard to, that would be I would be buying the stock as it's falling, and I'm trying to tell you, I think it's going to have a bit of a bounce. But it's, who knows, because there's definitely, you can't get away from the fact that this is more than just a roster composition challenge or something. Or it's this, there's a lot of dynamics at play with the Rangers that make it hard to know, what they got to do to get out of that. But, it hasn't been a good week, hasn't been a good month, frankly, for New York.
No. Okay. Really quickly back to Montreal, Nashville. I don't want to make it just a Rangers pod, but yeah, I think you have a good assessment of that trade. I just can't help but think of Montreal kind of get to that glut of defensemen. They move on from Jordan Harris. It ends up working out with Patrick Laine, who's been the best power play weapon they've had in maybe since Cole Caulfield, but also maybe even beyond that, who knows? And then for Nashville, another defenseman gone. Remember Dante Faber being put on waivers too earlier this season. Just two interesting teams with two different looks on their defensemen. That's the first thing that stands out. And I know I'm kind of coupling both teams in my assessment here, but that stands out for me. Well,
I mean, this is what we have to understand when we talk about rebuilds is you do collect a bunch of prospects, and you definitely like them all when you make the drafts because it's potential, right? You're excited by the potential, but eventually it gets to the reality where you got to give out contracts. You got to find playing time for everyone. Not every player, of course, develops in a straight line the way you'd hope, progression. And then you got to make some of these decisions. And I think there's more of them ahead for Montreal, quite frankly. They still have a lot of young players. But this is, the good news is this is what you can do with it. You don't have to, not all prospects become they've turned this into an actual NHL player, right? I mean, we could debate, what Alexander Carrier is going to bring to them, but he's under contract for 2 more years, and he's been a full-time NHLer. I think he can help them. I think, especially there's even some value there. Just another steady partner for a young guy. You already have Matheson, you have Savard on that blue line, but there's just a lot of young players around that team. And so I like the idea for them. And I do think you just eventually, you can't hoard the draft picks and prospects forever, because those players want opportunity. They want places to play, and they're probably looking around going okay, you've got 5 other right Ds you've drafted. Where am I going to fit in the puzzle here? And so, that's a little bit how you get to a day like that. And the Laine trade, as you mentioned, I don't know if you saw the stat, but he's got a chance to be the first NHLer ever to score 40 goals and be minus 40 in a season. Because not a lot of good's happening 5-on-5 when he's on the ice, but he's just been electric on the power play, and obviously had the power play hat trick the other night, and he's got 7 goals so far.
Is going 40 goals and minus 40 the NHL equivalent to, maybe not the exact equivalent, but the first thing that comes to mind is Jameis Winston in the NFL throwing 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions?
Yeah. I mean, probably. Like, look at, I'm not chipping away at Patrick Laine. He's been a great story. Like, I love, he did an interview the other day. He's talking about, like, he's still been a very champion for mental health. It's been great to see him there scoring. Like, he fits in so well. It feels like the Canadiens fans have put their arms around him, but, like, you know, he's still rediscovering his game. I mean, we knew he had that shot. It's just great. It's been great that it's worked. I mean, there was one clip going on. I don't know if you saw it, of one of the goals the other night where it just, like, it was right behind him in the top. I mean, it's like hockey perfection, beautiful.
Oh yeah.
So I'm not actually taking a shot at him, but I'm just pointing out that, you know, this is kind of what he's been known for at times during his career, and you know, there's still some work to be done there. But if your team, it depends. Look, at the Canadiens didn't score enough last year, right? Like, they got Laine in part for goals. Obviously, they don't want him giving up a whole bunch the other way, but the fact if he could score 40 goals, I think they'd take it, even with some of the defensive, you know, deficiencies there, just because, like, they need that element, and they'd probably look to make up for some of the, you know, the less refined parts of his game in other ways.
Okay. Yeah. I'm glad we clarified that with Patrick Laine. Like, great story. Just a little joke with the 30 interceptions thing with Jameis Winston. Is there anything else we need to go on that trade before we mention the third move of the day? Pierre-Olivier Joseph going, I'm heartbroken about that trade, by the way, with St. Louis and Pittsburgh, but Pierre-Olivier Joseph going back to Pittsburgh for future consideраtions. Anything else we want to mention with the Montreal National trade before we move on?
No. Yeah, the Joseph trade is more about, it's not analyzing the trade. It's just like, oh man, these brothers got to play together for, I mean, I look at the bright side. They got to play together for 3 months. That's still pretty cool in the NHL. Like, no one ever taken that away from them.
For sure. I think they took photos together in advance of the Winter Classic game happening at the end of this month, early next month. Like, just it's just funny. I mean, it's a small part of it, obviously, but just like a funny thing to see that, like, oh, we're about to see two brothers play outside with the St. Louis Blues of the Winter Classic, and that's not going to happen. Again, just kind of more of a sillier thing, but yeah, I'm really curious about Pittsburgh wanting Pierre-Olivier Joseph back in the fold.
Well, I mean, look, this is what the Penguins have been doing. This is very consistent. Is they're looking for players mid-20s, a little lower, not getting enough opportunity somewhere else. So, you know, they're trying to just find incremental improvement with these guys. It's been consistent with other moves they've made this season. The Penguins, I should say, because we've definitely banged on them pretty good early in the year, have kind of stabilized a little bit. They've certainly won more games and got themselves into a playoff race, which is, you know, what they want. I mean, that's if they can become a playoff team, where it looked like that wasn't even going to be a reality in November, you know, as much as we wouldn't classify them as a cup contender, I would say that would be job accomplished. So they have gotten things back on the rails. And so I think for them, it's a player that they know well. Peo was originally drafted by Pittsburgh and, you know, spent some time there before moving on. And, you know, he's a right shot D, 25, with NHL experience. And they got him for future considerations, which in this case equates to nothing. I mean, they've basically agreed to take on his contract, from the Blues. You know, the Blues had, first of all, added an extra defenseman, and getting Cam Fowler. But also, you know, it's been thought that in adding Cam Fowler's money in that deal, that they've been looking to probably shed a little bit of contract elsewhere. You know, that's why Brandon Saad's name in part was making the rounds around the trade wheel. And, you know, now Joseph is the one to go.
Hey everyone, I'm Julian McKenzie, and Chris Johnston has decided to join me to talk to you guys about why Mint Mobile is so great. Thanks to Ryan Reynolds for Mint Mobile, by the way. We really appreciate you, buddy. Friends don't let friends overpay for wireless. I think that's pretty true. Isn't that right, CJ?
Yeah, I would never let a friend overpay for wireless, especially when Mint Mobile is offering premium services starting at $15 a month.
Come on, like, that's such a good deal. And all their plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your own phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Like, it just makes perfect sense.
$15, you can't even get a beer for that at an NHL game.
That needs to change. but that's a whole other ad in itself. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. And if you want to take advantage of this customer offer in your new 3-month premium wireless plan for $15 a month, mintmobile.com/Johnston. CJ, your last name is not that hard to spell.
Johnston. Get on Mint Mobile.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
CJ, you mentioned the trade freeze earlier. Is there a possibility we could see another trade before it kicks in tonight?
I would certainly think there's a possibility. I mean, even having 3 trades on trade freeze eve is unusual. It's been a very busy start to the calendar for NHL trades. And, you know, the sense is there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot flying around. You know, and so, you know, I don't, there's no upside generally in saying this is going to happen on a podcast that might come out after it might not have already happened. Cause the trade freeze does kick in 11:59 PM Eastern on Thursday. But if a team was to make a deal, wouldn't surprise me if it was Vancouver. They've really been working the market hard, looking for another defenseman. So I could see them making a move. I believe Pittsburgh's been up to more than just the Pierre-Olivier Joseph deal. So they could be a team perhaps that gets something over the line. You know, Buffalo, given the struggles of the Sabres, wouldn't surprise me if they made some kind of transaction. So put it this way. It's not going to be day once we're done recording this where my phone, goes away and I just, you know, go on to Christmas shopping. They're still going to be trying to figure out what's going on out there because it feels definitely way more active. This hasn't been a normal season for transactions in any way. And it's not even a normal feel. Like usually you get this close to the Christmas holiday and that freeze is there and everyone's just kind of like, yeah, we're just kind of cruising into the holidays. The league does not have that feel right now.
Okay. Well, we got to be on top of that. Also, Buffalo, 11-game losing streak. It's not getting any better over there.
Not only is it not getting any better, I mean, look at the scene that they're going to have when they play on Friday at home against the Maple Leafs. You know, given how close those two teams are, it's always a game that's kind of a half and half game in terms of fans. Buffalo fans wisely selling their tickets to those from Ontario at a jacked up rate. And so it's going to be a building of sort of, I don't know if it'll be half and half, but it'll be a split building. You're probably at a position where Sabres fans aren't inclined to cheer their team anyway. You know, the Leafs have won a couple games in a row, including one over Buffalo last weekend. So it's not an easy game for the Sabres to go into in terms of trying to end that losing streak. This is a big coal in the stocking kind of vibe right now for the Sabres as they go into that game in particular. And then on top of it, they play Saturday in Boston. So this is kind of it's a tough weekend series for them. And you know, you're just looking for anything to hit the pressure release valve. You know, we talked a lot about Terry Pegula's talk with the team. I mean, they laid an egg in Montreal right after it. I mean, they get scored on 20 seconds into that game, lose 6-1. You know, it's, I'm out of superlatives. I've heard secondhand that they're really flailing internally, trying to find the view from around the league as they're trying to find things to make happen. But yeah, I will be very curious to see what the environment looks like on Friday when they're back at home and riding this losing streak. You know, it's even like that would be a normal Friday night, the last Friday right before Christmas. You know, for some people, it's probably the start of their time off. Like that would have been a really festive game under normal circumstances, a rivalry type night. You know, the kind of game people probably bought their tickets for, you know, months ago and were excited about it. Now it's just going to be a festival of, I don't know what.
One more thing before we get to Stick Tap Siege. An update on the NHL Face-Off series from Amazon.
Yes, it's officially being greenlit for a second season, you know, which means that cameras will be going back behind the scenes here with players and you know, for a fall 2025 release. And, you know, first of all, personally, I'm pumped about this. You know, one thing, you know, when I talked to people that were involved in the first go around is they saw a lot of things where they felt they could have been better. You'll remember the cameras, I guess it was earlier this year, but last season for the first season of Face Off, inside the NHL. They didn't start going out to talk to players until March. I think William Nylander was the first player they shot scenes with, and that was in March when they went to his apartment. And so really the league ended up and the show producers were limited to being able to feature players that were in the playoffs. They ended up being kind of, because you're limited to players in the playoffs, then a lot of the storylines are driven by what was happening in the playoffs because you're not getting more. But I think by, having this in place now, there's going to be more lead time to do some different stories. I think it will, it's going to be, obviously they're going to build off the success of what went well in season 1, but I think it's going to, we're going to see a little bit more of a 360 view of some of the players' lives. And again, we'll maybe even feature players or stories that don't necessarily have anything to do with the playoffs themselves. And so, yeah, that's great news. And the reason that's happening is because enough people watched the original and liked it. It's that simple. I was actually at the launch show, and it was before it officially came out. And I talked to one of the guys who works for who co-founded Box to Box, which is the production company that's done Drive to Survive and the Full Swing for the PGA Tour, and was involved in this. And he said at that point, he's like, I want a season 2 before season 1's even out there. But he's like, we just need the viewers to match the product. Like, we think we have a great product here. If the viewers sort of affirm that by watching it and liking it, then there's going to be another season. And so here we are. And I already know your next question. Who's going to be involved?
Yep.
Only have one answer so far. Brady Tkachuk will be. The show cannot get enough of the Tkachuks. And remember, he made a sort of a brief cameo, we'll call it, in season 1. He was at Matthew's place with his dad Keith in episode 3 of that show. But he's going to be one of the more principal guys here. Look, maybe they're going to get into all this trade stuff we've been talking about, all these rumors.
You'd have to think, right? Trade stuff, the leadership stuff too. There's some material for Brady Tkachuk throughout this season. He's a new dad too, isn't he? If I'm not mistaken. Yes, he is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm sure they'll explore those aspects. I do know they want to kind of get into, doesn't necessarily have to be partners, but I think they want to explore some of the personal relationships players have, whether maybe it could be with a dad in his case, could be with his partner, his wife, or what have you. I think that, they see it a chance to expand kind of like what they did in season 1, so that it's not all just, hey, we got in the dressing room and this guy freaked out. That was kind of interesting, of course, with Connor McDavid, but I don't think you can sustain that forever. For one, because, who knows? I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole, but you might not always get that scene, right? Like, that scene was natural. That's what made it what it was. But yeah, I think it's good for the league. I know maybe not everyone was their favorite thing, but I thought for the first kick of the can, it was pretty strong. And I'm willing to bet with more lead time, with the experience of what they went through in season 1. I think with other players seeing what the final product looked like, they're going to have more buy-in even from other players. I could see it growing as opposed, might be the rare sequel that gets better, is my point.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the series improves in quality. I liked what we saw from the first season, and I think them adding Brady Tkachuk, it makes sense, and I also feel like it was inevitable, considering how he was like on the series with Matthew. It's just his personality in general. Like, he fits for that type of show.
Yeah, and you have to look at it too. Like, probably a lot of people listening to our podcast are hardcore hockey fans, but some of this is being aimed at you're trying to build an audience who isn't just hardcore hockey fans, and those people are now getting to know the Tkachuk family again. If you're a hardcore hockey fan, you're like, yeah, we know the Tkachuk family. Did you fall on your head? They've been prominent members of the NHL kind of for like 30 years in a row. Mm-hmm. But, it's a chance, I think, to tell more of the story of their family and to people that don't know it. I don't know if you watched The Full Swing, but for example, they did Joel Damon, who's kind of a everyman golfer on the PGA Tour. He's somewhere, he made a joke in there. I think he was in the 70s, roughly, in the world golf ranking. Like, obviously they feature Rory McIlroy and Justin Thomas and the stars, but then they did Joel Damon in season 1, and it was so popular they brought him back in season 2 and sort of revisited him. So I think you almost have to look at it like it's a little bit like a sitcom series. It's not quite the same thing, but there's some people that will watch this, but don't actually watch a lot of NHL games and don't know everything about the league. And so I think it's smart to do that. And obviously the Tkachuks, right from Papa on down to his 2 sons, and really his daughter and his wife, they're very open people, very loving people, very close-knit family, and they got lots of personality to spare.
I like that. I do like the inclusion of Brady Tkachuk for this season. I'm hoping that the season gets better. Do you have a stick tap before we wrap up today?
I do. Just a quick one for me. My stick tap is for an unknown fellow you may have heard of by the name of Steve Dangle. And
okay.
I'm stick tapping Steve, not only for creating a network that's given us this pod and many laughs over the years, but he had a good week out there. He put on his reporter hat and, got in the ring a little bit. And I saw all sorts of people commenting here and there and that. And it's not easy to be doing that. But I'm just saying stick tap to Steve for being such a great guy, working so hard for his audience and doing a great job. So, Steve, hope you have a good holidays with your family and great work this week.
Good on you, Steve. I like Steve getting some love this week, considering his reporting and considering some of the noise around him. I like that. I'll say for mine, I have two options for my stick tap. One could be a little bit more serious, I guess. I mean, not even that serious. This is awesome. Scott Oak from Hockey Night in Canada being named to the Order of Canada. What a huge honor from one of the best in our business. He also gifted me a Hockey Night in Canada towel. So shout out to you, Scott Oak. Big homie. The other stick tap I want to give, Zach Dietz. We almost had an e-bug situation over the weekend in the Senators-Pittsburgh Penguins game. Zach Dietz almost having to step in for the Senators, who did not have Anton Forsberg available. You've seen the video of him running to the Canadian Tire Center with his gear. I thought that was a really funny story. Him showing up to the rink wearing a Josh Norris jersey, him sitting in a dressing room just with his gear on, waiting to go at any moment's notice. Like, I think I know we kind of touched on it before, but like e-bugs, I like them. I think it's a really fun story. It's the closest we get to seeing a person being plucked off the street living the NHL life. So I'm cool with giving Zach Dietz, the e-bug, a stick tap this week. I'm cool with that. So I have two stick taps. I'm making up for the negativity I've brought the last few weeks.
Yeah. You're putting the cross checks away. It's the Christmas season, my friend.
Yeah, of course. I'm all about giving, especially at this time of year, my friend. I think that's going to do it for today's episode. And with that, we made it. We've reached that plateau. We've reached the milestone. Congratulations, my friend. We've done 300 episodes of this show.
Awesome. Here's the 300 more and then some.
Absolutely. Get your questions in for the next Ask CJ and subscribe to our podcast if you haven't done so already, and leave a like and rating. We'll talk to you all very soon. Bye.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.